Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Live at Lunch. If you are on a weight loss medication or you're thinking of going on a weight loss medication, then the conversation today is going to be such a powerful one, and I hope you get great value from it. Please feel free to pop your thoughts in the comment, even if you only watch the replay, and I'll do my best to get back to you with some suggestions or advice or whatever it is you need. Or otherwise, I'd just love to hear your experience, because here's the thing. We're all being inundated with all the success stories about the Ozempics, the Manjaros, the Wegovy's, and maybe you even know people who are just thrilled with the weight loss and how skinny they're feeling. But what we're not hearing so much about, and sadly this is a much bigger problem than I think we realize, is that there are plenty of people on these medications who are not getting the results and not experiencing that same thing, because they may be continuing to overeat anyway, or most certainly there are a lot of people who are still struggling with cravings. And we're going to talk about why that is and how to heal that problem. And more importantly, if you're not even considering going on Ozempic, or you are, or the like, then we're going to just dive into what are the root causes of overeating. If an appetite suppressant or a change in our hormonal, there's something as powerful as a weight loss drug can't stop the overeating and the cravings in some cases, what can? So we're going to dig into the root cause of this today. And we're going to go as far back as we can so I can help you understand what might be driving overeating in your case if you're struggling with this in the first place. Because we all know this isn't just about appetite control. And I can say that with a lot of confidence, because I bet that if you were to reflect on any times you've been overeating, you haven't necessarily been hungry, but you were eating anyway. So what's going on with all this non-hunger eating? What's going on there? Well, we're going to get into that today. If you've just joined me, my name's Helen. I am someone who specializes in helping people identify and heal the root cause of overeating, so that should they, and if they choose to in the future, reintroduce some gentle, compassionate, and kind weight loss methods, that they'll actually work this time. So if that sounds something like good that you're interested in, then let's dive in. So what we're seeing with the weight loss medications is that there are a number of people who are perhaps losing weight, but still feeling out of control, anxious around food, still feeling they can't trust themselves around food. We're also seeing people who are not losing weight because they're continuing to overeat, binge eat, emotionally eat, stress eat anyway, despite the nausea they might be experiencing. And we're seeing people, of course, most people who come off the medication, the weight just comes back on almost instantaneous. Well, not instantaneously, but it happens very fast. So let's dig in, because if you're considering going on the medication, then, or you're on it, then I'd love for this content to at least help you begin to do the real work, so that as you wean yourself off the medication, because most people don't want to be on it forever, you will have the best opportunity of not having radical weight gain, because you will have done the deeper work at healing out the root causes. So what is driving this non-hunger eating? Well, the thing is, we've got to go all the way back. Let's go all the way back, because what I see is there's some common, two things in particular that are common in the clients that reach out for help with non-hunger overeating. And that is, one, that they tend to have, usually in their teenage years, embarked upon one or a series of very successful but highly restrictive dieting protocols. They lost a lot of weight. It was amazing. They even got maybe a huge amount of praise for it. But at some point, the diet stopped working and that weight started to come on again. And oftentimes, it was accompanied by an obsession about food, thinking about food all day. It's called food noise. We hear a lot about that in these circles. The constant thinking about, worrying about, obsessing about food, and oftentimes body image. And so why does that create overeating? Well, it's such a great question. And in my experience, the body, when it's exposed to a massively restrictive massively, when it's exposed to, Bennett, get your words right, when our bodies experience massive caloric restriction, what seems to happen is the body then sort of encodes that as a trauma. And there's a trauma response to that if we ever try and go on a diet again. So I got to a point where that trauma response was so intense that even if I just thought, and in some cases still do, even if I think about maybe losing a few, kilos intentionally, and think about restricting something in order to do it, I can actually feel a visceral nervous system response that just freaks out. And when I feel that, I'm just immediately going, no, don't. We're not even going to go there again. Don't worry, body. We're safe now. And if you think that this is all just a bit silly, and you don't really notice that in yourself, think about this. The Minnesota semi-starvation experiment took a number of very healthy, very happy men a number of years ago. Well, if you got almost a century ago, actually, and put them through a semi-starvation experiment. They went through a period of severe caloric restriction. And those perfectly happy, healthy men who had had no experience of mental illness before, or just eating disorder before joining the experiment, all completely voluntary, by the way, came out of that experience with oftentimes years of overeating and compulsion and feeling out of control and obsessing about food. And I think if you actually just Google that and you look at all the things that the men experienced as a result of going through that experiment, you might be shocked at how familiar that all sounds. A drop in libido, hoarding recipes and cookbooks, having lots of snacks and cookies and things always kind of at their disposal, and feeling very uncomfortable when they didn't have food available to them. And that in some cases took years for them to heal from that experience. Any wonder then that somebody in the modern age who's put themselves through not just one, but multiple restrictive dietary protocols might experience a real trauma response, a kind of automatic hell no from the body as a result. So can that be healed? Yes, but it takes time. And it will depend on how restrictive you've been and how ready and willing you are to truly ditch the diet mentality, to truly let go of that highly restrictive desire, and really allow for deep healing. And then in time, you can, if you choose to, and often people don't because they're so happy, but if you choose to, you can reintroduce some very gentle, caring dietary protocols again and get the results you're looking for, because the intentionality of it has so fundamentally changed. So that's the one thing we see. We see the root cause has often been decades of, in many cases, of dieting. And we've got to really show the body a deep and relentless series of experiences that the body is not under threat anymore, and that it doesn't need to panic and hold on to the fat, and it doesn't need to freak out and get you to overeat every time you think about going on that next diet. The second thing we see, usually concurrently, is that the men and women who struggle with overeating, non-hunger eating, oftentimes emotionally charged non-hunger eating, had an upbringing where they were not really able to, or weren't taught how to, express uncomfortable emotions. So let me ask you a question. When you were 7 or 8 years old and you were at school, let's say, and you've had a bit of a fight with a friend, and you come home and you're all sorts of upset about it. Maybe you're angry, maybe you've been bullied and you feel shame or fear, or maybe you've just had a tiff with your best friend and you're mortified and you're in tears. Who did you go to when you came home at the end of that experience? Most people, not everybody, but most people, when I ask a question of that nature, what we discover is they'll say, nobody. Maybe they'd go to their room. Maybe they'd, play with some toys. But most times when I ask that question, we get the answer, no one. And for whatever reason, and those reasons are too complicated to go into in a conversation like this, but those children tend to be left with those really painful emotions, left to deal with them on their own. Or it's just not safe to express them. They'd be shut down or told to shut up or to stop if they were expressing them. And so what they tended to do is to reach for, and this is not conscious, other things to help them cope with those emotions. And all sorts of different behaviors. You see a lot of similarities from um, escaping into movies and books. Actually, that's oftentimes when we see some overeating or some comfort eating beginning, oftentimes in those years too. Imaginary friendships, as I said in the last live, like falling in love with a movie star or boy band. But then it can move into other behaviors like cutting or hitting themselves. It's interesting how a child who is not able to express some of their feelings will find a way to release that pain. And sometimes it's really sweet and kind or gentle, and other times it's really quite self-punishing. And you might find after listening to that there's quite a few of those things that you might have experienced when you were younger. So really what we do through this work is we help identify what are the emotions that food has become the only way you know how to cope with, and how can we begin to cope with those emotions in a really adult and appropriate way where we get the release, where we get the expression. Because in most cases, what the adults in us who come into this work are not realizing yet is the things that they didn't think they could do or express or feel when they were younger, it's just no longer true. Oftentimes they are in relationships where they can be bold or be, angry or be sad, and they're not going to be rejected, but their nervous system hasn't cottoned on to that yet. Plus, they were never given the tools on how to express those things in a really healthful way that doesn't put anybody else at risk. So, it's tricky work. I keep saying it. This food freedom business can be messy. It can be complicated. We got to unravel, like a messy ball of yarn. But you know what? If you're working with somebody who's really experienced in this, you'll be able to get some real momentum and results incredibly quickly in order to heal the deeper problems and then not be reaching for food as a result. Because when it's a bit of a messy and complicated business, what you need actually is somebody who can say, where can we get that 80-20? Where can I give you 1 or 2 or 3 things to work on where you're going to see the bulk of the results? So if I was working with somebody who'd been highly restrictive when they were younger, we might start immediately with repairing that relationship with food and then only get to the emotional work down the line. But sometimes not everybody needs that. And we just get straight into building a sense of safety around releasing and expressing their authentic emotional truths in a way that they get the experience repeatedly, that it's okay and it's safe. And so they're not only learning how to do it, but their nervous system is actually realizing that it's safe to, and it's not reaching for food as a way to cope. So, if you're working with somebody who knows what they're doing here, then we can identify where you can get the benefits faster. So you can make some nice momentum, and then slowly we crack on with all the other good stuff. And then, lastly, the thing to speak about, I think that is really relevant, is oftentimes people who've experienced those kind of childhoods will arrive in the realm of coaching in a very self-critical space, holding themselves to unbelievably high standards that are almost impossible to achieve, and then feeling a deep sense of failure or not enoughness if they're not hitting those standards all the time. And that feeling of not enoughness is an uncomfortable feeling that they might be medicating with food. That feeling of constantly failing and not achieving what they'd like to achieve, and the fear that they have that if they don't achieve it, they will be rejected, can create so much mental discomfort and self-criticism that food then might be playing the role to punish themselves or medicate or soothe that mental frame. So we can do the work on that too. But you can see how none of those things really have anything to do with hunger per se. And that's why food is just playing the role of regulating our sort of nervous system, regardless of whether we're hungry or not. Because in this work, we always want to be eating appropriately in response to hunger. But what we want to eliminate is all the non-hunger eating. And that's why with these medications, yes, they can turn off the hunger, but it doesn't do anything to address the non-hunger eating that people are experiencing. I hope that has given you a bit of insight and understanding into what might be driving overeating in general, but certainly if you're on a weight loss medication and you're tearing your hair out, wondering why this is still happening. And I hope you might be feeling more ready and willing to dive into the weeds and to start to do the deeper stuff so that you can get the healing that you truly, truly need and the healing that lasts a lifetime. So if you found this video valuable and you'd like it to reach other people who might be struggling with this, please smash that like button. If you've enjoyed the content, you want to see more, please subscribe. And I guess most importantly, if you are struggling with this, if you're thinking of going on a weight loss medication or you're on one and you want to come off, then reach out, let's connect. And I can talk you through the program and how it works and how specifically it might work for you. Happy Thursday, everybody. I hope you're having a beautiful lunch, a really beautiful and intuitive and calm and delightful lunch today. I hope you are able to savor it without feeling out of control. And I want to wish you a wonderful rest of your Thursday and a fabulous weekend ahead. I'll see you next Thursday, live at lunch.